has firsthand knowledge about Chicago, having served in the Illinois House since 1994, giving him at least 3 terms of exposure in the Illinois legislature to Chicago-related legislation. Our guest today was born in Rockford, graduated from Rockford East High School, received a bachelor's degree from Tulsa University, and graduated with honors from the Marquette University Law School in 1985. For almost the entire next decade, our guest today served as assistant city attorney and then city attorney. In 1994, our guest today was elected to the Illinois House, succeeding an Illinois legendary legislator, Zeke Georgie. Since his election to the House in 1994, our guest has distinguished himself as a champion of the needs of working class families and urban renewal. This past April, he was elected mayor of Rockford. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the mayor of Rockford, Mayor Doug Scott. Your Honor.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, Jay. Good afternoon to everyone here. I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to be with you. I consider Chicago a truly great city, and my favorite city to visit when I'm leaving the city of Rockford. And it is really good to be able to be with you and address you. And it's interesting, as Jay mentioned, being in the legislature, being exposed to Chicago issues, and find out how often those issues and the interests of the city of Chicago interacted with the interests of the city of Rockford. And we really did agree on far more than we ever disagreed on. And as I've become mayor, and for the last 6 months, I've been trying to reach out to other mayors. And yesterday, for example, attended the Metropolitan Mayors Conference, which was really nice to be there as well. And we find out that we really are working together on most issues. I have the pleasure today of sharing with you a few words about Rockford, which is, as you heard, my hometown, and a place that I am truly, truly glad to say that not only I'm from, but that I represent. And before I get into remarks about Rockford, I too want to thank the sponsors for this event, including Commonwealth Edison. And I know every time you come into Chicago and start talking about municipal relationship with Commonwealth Edison, you raise some eyebrows. But we've got a truly wonderful relationship with ComEd, and we have for many, many years. We found them in Rockford to not only provide wonderful service, but also to be a tremendous civic partner and resource for us. And so we appreciate your sponsorship of today very, very much. I also have to acknowledge, Jay introduced all the dignitaries in the room, but I'm very fortunate to have with me a group of people that I work with, and many of whom I'll be referring to during the course of my remarks. But one person I have to make reference to first is a person who really keeps me going and helps me provide all the balance in my life. That's my lovely wife, Tammy, who's here with me. I know a number of my fellow mayors are here, and including a former mayor. He left that off of Joe's resume, but served with distinction as a mayor. And I can tell you, even having been as close to it as I was for 10 years, I've developed a brand new appreciation for what mayors do in the past 6 months. I learned a couple of things that in my conference room when we're having a meeting, when I stand up, the meeting's over. I didn't realize that for the first couple of weeks, and but once that happens, you have to go with it, and whether the meeting was over or not. The other thing that I learned very, very fast, you're used to being in the legislative process and arguing with each other and telling each other in a very nice way that you really don't know what each other is talking about, and you go through that whole process. And I can remember the first week being in office in City Hall, and a group of our department heads were around discussing a really complicated issue, and everybody, very bright people, very dedicated people, and all putting all their input into the discussion. And they kind of looked. Giving an inkling of which way I'm going. So, Rockford Chamber of Commerce Board in Rockford before I came out here. A gentleman who represents one of the aerospace industries in Rockford was sounding, in his hopeful language that maybe it'd be 1 to 2 years, that they were looking for some kind of recovery after what happened September 11th. But we know that the economy was softening up, and that affects Rockford as it does everywhere else. We're seeing it in sales tax, of course, and we're fortunate in that we're diversified enough in our revenues so that we're not totally reliant on sales tax. But we have seen that impact already, and we know we're going to see it in the future. Today's speech will be a little bit different than it would have been, if I'd been speaking to you on September 10th. And we all know that that's had such a major impact on all of us throughout the nation, and Rockford is no different. And in most cases, it doesn't change what we want to try to accomplish, but we have to be realistic that our timelines have changed a little bit on some of the issues. Rockford has a rich history, and it was interesting. There are a lot of people in the room who are either still in Rockford or new to Rockford who came with us today. But there are a lot of people in the room that had part of a history of Rockford at one time or another. And it was interesting in talking to people ahead of time to kind of confirm the things that we were talking about Rockford. It has a rich history. It has a rich history in a lot of ways as an immigrant stopping point, for example. Stories about the Swedish immigrants who stayed in Rockford because that's where the passenger train stopped. I wish they still stopped in Rockford, and we can talk about that in a minute. As it developed, Rockford became a world leader in manufacturing, from furniture to machine tool industries to the knitting factories that were a major part of Rockford's existence. At one time, Rockford boasted of being the largest producer of hosiery in the country and the second largest furniture producer in the entire nation. But it was in the machine tool industry itself that Rockford solidified its national and international reputation. Rockford became known, and I swear I'm not making this up, as the screw capital of the nation. You can insert your own lines there. I know I'm safe in this group, but you can still insert your own lines. And I can recall Ryan Petty, who's the head of our Chamber of Commerce, is here, and he didn't come up with this slogan, but in the 1970s, I remember having a T-shirt when I was in high school that was put out by the Chamber of Commerce with a phrase on it, "Make it in Rockford." I'm sure you can imagine how popular that slogan was with high school students in my generation. But what was extremely popular then was the fact that when you were in high school, you could leave high school before or after graduation, walk into any number of factories, and get the kind of job that you knew was going to be able to provide for you and your family for years to come. That was something that many of my classmates did. I graduated from high school in 1978. That was a very, very common occurrence at that time. And during that period of strength that Rockford experienced, and if you read some of the illustrated histories of Rockford, they will tell you that it was really thought of as the manufacturing leader of a city its size in the entire country. But during that entire period of prosperity, which lasted almost a century, Rockford was really in many ways setting itself up for a fall. We were very slow to look for help from the outside world. Among the last of cities our size to accept any federal funds, for example. We're heading to Washington, the fire chief and I, after we leave here today, and it seems incomprehensible to us as we go out looking for funds, as every other municipal official does, that you had a time in Rockford, which really occurred up until almost the 1970s, where Rockford adamantly refused to look for federal funds in any area. And we rejected the opportunity to go after a variety of pursuits that could have helped us. And Grant Linsky was doing this part of the speech before, so if I don't finish it all, Grant can finish it for you later. Rockford natives can recite with a litany of missed opportunities. For those of you who have been to Rockford before, you know that you make a right turn at the clock tower, go north to Wisconsin, and never see the downtown or the city of Rockford. NIU, a long time ago, over a century ago, was eschewed by the city fathers of Rockford as not wanting that to be there, which is really ironic given some of the comments I'm going to make in a couple of minutes. The Chrysler plant, regional shopping malls, you can go through this entire litany, and I'm serious about this. If you go to Rockford and ask anybody who's lived there any length of time, they can recite all of these different things to you. It was a combination of isolationism and protectionism. The fear of being, dependent on things that were coming with strings attached from the outside world, and protectionism by some of the industrial magnates, quite frankly, who ran the city, who weren't that interested in union laborers coming into Rockford at something like the Chrysler plant, for example, weren't all that interested in competitive businesses coming in and taking some of the workforce away, especially if they might pay a little bit more than they were. And as the economy was clicking along and Rockford was doing very well, this worked out to be okay. And then the late 70s hit and all the rules changed. When the economy went sour late in that decade, it hit Rockford even harder, as we had most of our economic eggs in the manufacturing basket. Those jobs were leaving Rockford in droves. I mean, the mayor at the time, John McNamara, who took over in 1981, at the height of the difficulties that Rockford was having, actually at a city council meeting put a sign on the front of the podium that said, leave the lights on, I'm staying. I mean, it was that difficult of a time in the city of Rockford. Our unemployment rate, we jockeyed back and forth with Flint, Michigan for a time, and at its apex in Rockford, hit 26% unemployment in the early 1980s. And all of the resultant problems that come with that came to Rockford as well. People left housing opportunities, leaving behind a lot of infrastructure, a lot of houses, and no people in there. Many of the jobs during that time were replaced by service jobs, but the difficult times in Rockford forced a new approach to economic development, some of which is still with us today. Our mix of jobs is still heavily reliant on manufacturing. We're about 1 out of every 3 jobs now that's tied to the manufacturing industry, well down from what we were, but still higher than the national average. For the past 20 years, Rockford has climbed back through a combination of many public-private partnerships, extension of infrastructure, use of state-authorized incentives, strategic use of federal funds, sound financial management, with our bond rating now being among the highest ratings it's ever been now. But it took a long time to climb back into that position. The city stepped up in the early 80s with the help of the establishment of the Council of 100. And the executive director of the Council of 100, Bob Levin, is with us today. It's the local public-private partnership for economic development. The city, at the time when they were being hit hardest, with all of the jobs leaving the community, with all of the uncertainty over the employment situation, with tax issues that were raging very fiercely out of control, which ultimately resulted in 1984 and the voters taking away home rule authority for us, which presents some interesting issues for a city our size. Rockford stepped up and put $100,000 a year into the Council of 100, trying to match at that time the commitment that was being made by the private sector. The idea was to have 100 businesses who would contribute varying amounts. Now that number is well over 100 businesses. And we've really adopted with the Council of 100 something that I think is extremely necessary, and that's the more regional approach. We take the philosophy very strongly that it really doesn't matter if it lands in McChesney Park or in Loves Park close to Rockford, it will have benefits for Rockford. And if it lands in Rockford, it will also benefit the rest of the community. And the Council of 100 has really been working in the last couple of years very strongly to try to bring in more of the region, more of the government agencies to try to participate. And I think that that's something that's laying the groundwork for a Rockford that's going to be even healthier, and Rockford area that's going to be even healthier in the future. The Council 100 focuses on playing to Rockford's strengths, which is the manufacturing and warehouse distribution business. And Bob can tell you, if you haven't had a chance to talk with him already, has developed a wealth of knowledge. We're fortunate to get him in our community. But the competition is a little different now, and you're probably seeing the same thing in Chicago. You're seeing the same thing in other communities now. Our competition's not so much with each other. I don't know that it ever was, but it really isn't now. Our competition is the business that says, we've got 3 plants, we want to have 1. It's between you and Kalamazoo and Toledo or wherever the other plants are. What can you do for us? And in many ways, we need to work, and having just come from there and being in charge of the Urban Revitalization Committee, I know that we've got to continue to work with our legislators in both Springfield and Washington to try to build up some more incentives that municipalities and counties and economic development groups can be able to use to try to attract some of those businesses. The city also helped work with something called the Local Development Corporation. The LDC is a non-for-profit economic development agency that started off doing a industrial park at a time when people were going the other direction and leaving town. Participation loans, financing packages, and now they've branched out into helping with one of our corridor studies to do a grocery store project that will bring some much needed retail development, which hasn't existed in a part of the community which hasn't seen any such development in years. And of course, we do and still make use, and not being home rule, we're very limited. We have to make extensive use of those things that the state authorizes us to do, like tax increment finance zones, for example. We had 4 of them, more or less, for a lot of years, and I realize in Chicago it's up to 115 now or something like that, so our 4 don't seem like a lot in comparison. Our 4 don't seem like a lot compared to Mendota, which has 8. But what we've done in recent times, and what we really want to do in the new administration, is to be very aggressive with the use of TIFs. TIFs have proven to be very valuable to us in helping to help not-for-profits rehabilitate housing, for example. The head of the Zion Development Corporation, which has done wonderful work in Rockford to rehabilitate housing stock in a more challenged part of the city. In fact, it's a part of the city that has one of the lowest income census tracts for a predominantly Caucasian population of anywhere in the country. And Zion Development Corporation has been doing some fantastic work to help revitalize that area through a lot of it through the use of TIF funds. And now we're getting participation from a major employer in town to help push that project along even further and really to help revitalize the area. Make use of enterprise zone. Ours still has a little space that's left in it, so if you're thinking of a good place to do a project, we've got it. It's principally been used for industrial areas, but we've used it to do some other initiatives as well. But there are some brand new factories that have arisen in the southwest portion of town to be used that would not have been there had it not been for enterprise zones. We're trying to make use of the brownfield money that's there. Rockford, as you might imagine, given that manufacturing history and that older industrial history that we talked about, we're using very much so. We're looking to use brownfield money as provided by the state. And we settled the reason we have a lot of cause for optimism is we've done a lot of things and we've turned a corner in a lot of areas, one of which the credit goes to Mayor Box, to his administration, the Chamber of Commerce, and the City Council, because they helped to settle a Superfund site that encompassed 10 square miles of southeast Rockford, and did so without ever ending up in court. To be able to reach a settlement with the federal government that's really unparalleled in the nation, it was really a major accomplishment, and ended up getting a clean bill of health for an area that's huge within the city of Rockford. I think we've got a great story to tell, and let me give you just a couple of examples why I think we've got a great story to tell as we go out to try to bring more businesses to Rockford and try to grow those businesses that are there. Expansion Management Magazine, in their September issue, ranked us 69th in their most logistics-friendly cities, which includes transportation, distribution, industry climate, the workforce, road infrastructure, taxes and fees, railroads, water ports, and air service, among other criteria. Let me highlight a couple of these areas of why I think we did well in that area. On the area of roads, Rockford, as you might have gleaned from some of the comments before, has typically had kind of an inferiority complex about itself, and part of that stems from this notion that somehow we don't get our fair share of whatever we send to Washington, whatever we send to Springfield, that we somehow don't get our fair share back. A group of businesses, the city and the county, took that issue to task and formed something that they call the Better Roads Association, which is really bringing an intense business effort to the idea of what road planning should be done and where we would like to see the state improve their infrastructure in the roads in the Rockford area. And we had some tremendous successes last year to the point where we're getting all of the phone calls, basically something like, I tried to get across town and I couldn't find a way to get there because everything was blocked up. Those are obviously, in some ways, music to our ears, because that means that we're taking care of a lot of the infrastructure needs that we're going to need. We are served by Interstates 39 and 90, by 5 different railroad lines. And as you might have heard recently, the Rochelle, about 15 miles south of Rockford, just awarded an intermodal hub, which will also, we believe, have some tremendous benefits for the region. On air service, we are the 27th largest cargo airport in the nation, and we believe that those numbers will show that we're moving up rapidly in that area. We have the 2nd largest hub for United Parcel Service in the United States. We recently had a groundbreaking for Bax Global on a 21,000 square foot facility also at the airport. And we're getting many, many other inquiries in terms of cargo carriers who find our fees competitive, the fact that we're a foreign trade zone, and the U.S. Customs Port of Entry to be very much to their liking in terms of trying to bring cargo business there. We were also ranked among the 10 cheapest places to live, which we'll take pride in also. Called a thrifty hotspot. And I think appreciate it because it's based on a combination of affordable food, housing, transportation, and healthcare. And let me just give you a couple of items on each of those areas. In housing, the average home price is $95,300, which continually ranks us either 1, 2, sometimes 3 in the most affordable places to live in the country in terms of the biggest percentage of the population being able to reach the average home price. In medical care, we have 3 major hospitals and a not-for-profit community provider, all of whom provide tremendous service, which also fits into our livability or our quality of life issues, which we believe we have a lot to offer. A lot of people who I used to know in the legislature would say I was in Rockford, and invariably it was for a child's soccer tournament, softball tournament that was going on there. We have a tremendous Convention and Visitors Bureau that does wonderful work for us in the area of tourism. And a lot of that is based on athletics and sports and taking advantage of the parks and golf courses and bike paths and other recreational opportunities that Rockford has to provide. But we're also trying to become a cultural area as well. The city and a private group called the Friends of the Coronado helped restore, within the last 3 years, a 1927 era vaudeville theater, which is absolutely beautiful, with an architecture that, not being an architect, I could not adequately describe to you, but it's an absolutely beautiful theater. And between all of the parties, $18.5 million was raised to help restore this theater. About $10 million of that was private funds that were raised. The rest of it came from a combination of city and some state grants as well. But we have our own symphony. We have pro sports in Rockford, which may not measure up right now to the first place Bears. Had to get that in. The Metro Center, which for years has been an entertainment stopping off point for many entertainers. The Rolling Stones, that claim to fame, played there a long time ago, although they referred to our city as Rockfield at the time. Mixed from England, you know, what do we expect? And I think we're really turning the corner on an issue that has been proven to be extremely divisive and costly in Rockford. And we've been the subject of a major desegregation lawsuit for the last 10 years. And it has really been extremely expensive to the tune of over $200 million extra dollars for the city of Rockford. But worse than the money involved, it's been an extremely divisive issue with pitting different groups in the city against each other. The lawsuit is in its period of winding down. The school district is looking for ways to move forward. The school district is now only the 4th largest taxing district in the entire county for school districts now, instead of leading the way as it always had. And in fact, through some help with some state revenue, the school district recently refinanced construction of 3 new schools. And because of the state grants that were involved in the refinancing, the savings to taxpayers in Rockford is almost $33 million, which is obviously a huge amount for a city the size of Rockford. So we've got some new initiatives that are also going on in light of everything we've just said. Any new administration always comes in chock full of ideas, making these poor folks at the table to my left completely crazy on a regular basis. But the idea is to try to put as many balls as we can in the air and try to get out as much as we can into different areas and explain all of the good things that are going on in Rockford. We're going to be working very shortly on a new small business and minority business development program. We know that when we talk about job growth or job creation, a vast majority of that is going to come from businesses or from people that are already in Rockford who are looking to either develop an entrepreneurial idea or expand something that's already there. We're working very hard with the telecommunications providers to provide more broadband and high-speed internet access throughout the community. We finally got, they talk about the natives and their maps, we finally got out of all the providers where all of their facilities are. And we were able to draw a map that the Council of 100 and the Chamber have been working on as they go out and try to talk to other businesses about coming to Rockford. We're able to show them where all the high-speed internet capability is, and we think that will be extremely helpful for us in the future. We're working on tech parks, and when I say we, it also includes some of the neighboring communities. Belvedere, for example, just about 15 miles to our east, has been working on an agricultural tech park. We think that there is some synergy that can work between tech parks in Rockford that have more of a manufacturing base or more of a high-tech base, and also biotech. Rockford is home to 9 significant biotech companies. Obviously, that's a topic that, unfortunately, in many ways, has tremendous potential for them to develop new products now, but we're glad that they're doing that in Rockford. And some of these products have already been featured and are already being utilized now with just the recent problems that we've been having with anthrax. So we're also working very hard on our corridors and bringing in new business and trying to make Rockford as friendly as we can to people who are coming in. We've got major corridor studies in the West State and South Main areas, which are two of our older entrances to the city. Ways that we want to try to make the city more attractive. The city is going out and acquiring a lot of property to try to do that as well. We're trying to encourage people to come into those areas, and we're investing heavily in infrastructure in that area, as is the state. And as we try to work with them to bring more dollars in, because we know that especially in times where it's a little bit more difficult, us doing what we can to provide the infrastructure is going to be even more necessary. One area where we're working very hard is in the area of higher education. Rockford does, and I see Chairman of the Higher Education Committee from the House, Judy Irwin, is with us. One of the areas that Rockford doesn't do as well in is the percentage of people who have a four-year degree or higher. We do very well in terms of the number of people who have some college education. So what that's telling us is they're going to our community college, which is an excellent institution, and then they're either stopping or they're going on to get their degree somewhere else and not coming back. And we obviously don't want to lose that workforce. And so I have asked the Council 100 and the Chamber to develop a task force to make some recommendations as to how we can get some more higher ed options for our citizens there. And we also want to focus heavily on job training. The city invests heavily in that, and not just the welfare to work kind of job training, which is very, very necessary, of course, but also in the retraining, which is probably going to be even more necessary in the future. I mentioned trains a little bit earlier. We've spoken with Metra. We're trying to very hard to have Metra come as far out as Rockford. We think that the numbers are there to justify that. One realtor in Boone County, just to the east of Rockford, said that last year, 1 out of every 3 homes that was purchased by somebody in Boone County was purchased by someone who works in the suburbs or in Chicago. And those numbers aren't quite as dramatic in Winnebago County, but they are still very, very high. We're also working on at least having our hand in both Amtrak and their rail lines and the high-speed initiatives that are out there. And I'm going to finish up in terms of talking about an issue last by speaking about what happened last week in terms of Governor Ryan's address for the airport. I know this is a touchy subject to bring up here, and in fact, in the mayor's meeting yesterday, I got all kinds of different opinions about that. But we've been pushing for a long, long time, pushing everybody who will listen to us, that Rockford has a facility that warrants being used as part of the solution to Northern Illinois air travel in the next decades to come. We have a 10,000-foot runway, an 8,200-foot runway. We've landed the Concorde there and taken it off again. To not have any improvements at all at the Rockford Airport today, we believe that we could handle 1 million in-plane passengers a year, which is a substantial amount in this entire debate. With limited improvements, 3,500,000 passengers a year. Now, when you think about the number, O'Hare is approximately 33 million passengers a year, but only about 16 million of those passengers are on plane and originate at O'Hare. When you look at the long-range plan of the Greater Rockford Airport, which has been approved at the local level of FAA and is now in national for their approval, the long-range plan of the Rockford Airport calls for being able to handle up to 15 million in-plane passengers a year. We obviously think that we can play a major role in the debate. Now, up until last week, and why last week, even though when you read the news reports of it here and in the Chicago papers, it may have seemed like we were kind of an afterthought or just mentioned, but I have to give you a little bit of the context. Until last week, Secretary of Transportation Brown would never agree that Rockford could play a large part in the solution. Had talked about needing to move 2 rivers in order to do that, or to build 4 new runways, none of which is true. And Rockford's long-range plan calls for the building of 1 more parallel runway with a midfield terminal, and again, with some additional parking that would allow us to take that huge number of passengers every year. There are over 2.2 million people that live within a 45-minute drive of the Greater Rockford Airport, and over 1 million tickets were sold from that area in the last year. So we know that we've got a substantial role to play in this debate. We were encouraged last year when the House Aviation Subcommittee, or Committee, I'm sorry, that Julie Hamos chairs, indicated that Rockford should be included as part of the mix, and that's why we were very thrilled last week that we got the boost that we did from the governor, although we realize it's very early on in that entire debate. We had some good meetings with airlines prior to September 11th. Obviously, there isn't an airline out there that's in an expansion mode right now. We firmly believe we were on the track to getting some passenger air service in Rockford sometime next year. Obviously, we've got to kind of change our thought pattern a little bit, but I think there is going to be a need for the smaller airports, the regional jets that many airlines are talking about, and I think we will fit in very well with that. I'm obviously, hopefully it can convey to you how enthusiastic I am about the city. The city's got an interesting history, but I think we've got a very bright future. I think we're poised, our location in an entire region. We're doing a regional study right now that spans from Elgin to Madison and looks at that entire corridor for all the opportunities that it provides for both business, manufacturing, for higher education, biotech, all the different areas that provides. We think that we have the infrastructure, we know we have the workforce, and we think we have the people that are ready to really propel Rockford to even greater heights in the future. And we recognize that we're part not only of a larger region, but of a state. We realize the interconnectedness that we have with not just the city of Chicago, but with the other suburbs. And we plan to be very aggressive about going to both the state and to the federal government to continue to tell Rockford's story and let everyone know why we think it's a great place to do business. I don't think this is a time for us to be timid. I think in times like this that are a little bit more difficult, I think that we need to be as aggressive as we can to prepare ourselves for when the economy does turn around. And I think that we're poised and ready to do that, but not only in terms of resources, but also in terms of attitude. And I'll harken back to my Tulsa days by finishing up just by saying it was tremendous to be here. It was a great opportunity. I'll be glad to take any questions. And as far as Rockford is concerned, y'all come because we're good for business. Thank you very much.
As always, Lawrence Speedback. I mean, Joyce Saxon, you asked the first question. You want to ask the question of the mayor?
Helen Thomas.
Joyce goes,
She always wears red. I'm not wearing red.
Joyce,
All right.
and if you want to give it, because of television, we have
Yeah.
to have you step up to the microphone, but you're still in a sword's length distance between us, so you're okay.
Just a simple question, please, Your Honor. Have you benefited directly from Illinois First?
In some ways, but not as much as we would have liked. Illinois First, as we know, the $12 billion program, $4 billion of it was directly designed to help the CTA and mass transit in the Chicago area. $4 billion of it for roads and related things, and then $4 billion of it for water and sewer projects and some other things. We've done better in terms of the roads than we had done before. So Illinois First has benefited us to that extent. We are in the mix now with some larger sewer projects that, because there's more money in the pot through Illinois First, we're going to benefit from that. The interesting thing about Illinois First, and for the lobbyists and legislators in the room, Illinois First grew to take on under its umbrella a lot more things that were already in place before. And so, for example, part of the money from the Coronado Theater came from what we legislators affectionately called member initiatives, which was just the money that we were given to dole out in our districts. Now every one of those projects carries the Illinois First banner on it, even though member initiatives have been around since forever. But that's okay. We actually have done okay under Illinois First, although probably not to the degree that we would have liked. Thank you.
Any more? Step right up. Remember, it's the mayor of Rockford, not the mayor of Chicago.
I got to witness one of the press conferences yesterday. That was truly amazing.
I've seen a few too. I'm Tom Wolf with Giskalka Turman and Associates. My question is, there's a national business publication that puts out its annual best places to live, worst places to live, of which my hometown Madison's usually near the top, and your town Rockford's near the bottom. Madison's great, but Rockford's not that bad.
Right.
Do you Do you care about it? Do you handle it? Do you cancel your subscription? I mean, what do you do?
Yes, we care. We care because, and I think that part of my job, I honestly see part of my job to go out and tell everybody the things that I see about Rockford and the reasons that I see Rockford as being such a wonderful place to live, work, do business. I mean, for example, we talk about traffic jams in Rockford that are if you don't make the first light. Seriously, I mean, we have a large city and we've got a lot of cars and we move traffic a lot of cars every day, but that is a traffic jam in Rockford. And so I see it as part of my job to go out and talk about all of those things that are very good about Rockford. And so, yeah, that bothers me when I see that. Now, when you break it down and you see how the ratings are come up with, you can always rationalize away what they're saying. But I think it's important for us to try to fight whenever we can that stigma that somehow this is a bad place, because I simply don't believe it is. David?
You gotta go to the mic, Dave. Even you have to go to the mic.
Try to do it. I told him I read his stuff and sometimes it doesn't help.
Can't hurt.
Can't hurt.
Dave Lundy, DL Strategies in the Sun-Times. As you just pointed out, when you're elected, you've got a whole panoply of issues that you want to push all at once. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your top 2 or 3 economic development initiatives and what you would consider most important to achieve in the next couple of years.
That's a good question. I think part of it involves continuing to work on our downtown areas, and that involves an entire economic development array. We've been seeing in the last few years a renaissance that other cities are experiencing too. People are liking the idea of moving back into the cities for all of that provides. I know Peter's here from the Metropolitan Planning Council, and that works in well with the Growth Task Force and all the other things that we used to work on. But we really need to work on our downtown area, and it has been coming back. It got hit extremely hard in that same time period that I talked about before. Now we're actually seeing, and a lot of it is frankly with our assistance as well, and putting together other pieces of state available programs and other things. But we're seeing people putting up market rate housing in the downtown area, loft apartments, and some things that we really hadn't seen before, which to us is a great sign that we've started to get restaurants coming back and some other things there. We don't have the benefit of having a downtown that the interstate brings you to. You've got to really mean to get to our downtown area. And so we've been promoting that as both a cultural entertainment corridor and a good place to live and locate your high-tech business. For example, most of the high-speed internet that I talked about earlier were extremely well-wired in our downtown area. And so we've been using that as encouragement to bring people there. I think that's extremely important for us, that and the corridors into the city, because it says so much about what we think about ourselves as a community. I also think we need to do what we can to work. We've talked about the Council of 100. Part of my real goal is this entire regionalism approach and trying to bring in other businesses from other places, other states, try to help businesses that are there expand. We've committed to increasing our commitment to the Council of 100 from that $100,000 range that it's been. What we want to do is encourage other units of local government to join in with us as well and get that public part of the public-private partnership, get that percentage up, because it's really been skewed in the last few years. And if we can help develop that regional approach, I think we knock down a lot of the barriers to coming into an area if everybody's working together. So I would say those are probably, from an economic development standpoint, the 2 biggest areas we're working on, although it's hard to single out too, because we really do have a number of initiatives in a lot of places.
Grant?
My question/comment to you is going back to your economic development. Basically, you were talking about housing's come up a couple of times, as well as the affordability issue with it and the corridors. And you've got, obviously, the 2 corridors that straddle the river going to the south, and you've got the corridor to the west. And basically, it appears to me that until those three corridors are handled on a housing basis where there is good market rate and maybe even in some cases some affordable housing mixed in where people can come in and live closer into the city and feed back out to the bypass and out West State. That is going to be a real key to the resurgence of the city. And coupled with that, people are going to have to see that because the homes are their single biggest investments, they're going to have to, even though Rockford has been one of the more affordable places, that works as a double-edged sword because they're not seeing the investments go up in their homes, not as fast as, let's say, in the collar suburban areas here.
There's a question here, right?
Yes, there is. How can you go about getting, I mean, those things have to be solved, and I think that's the key. How can you go about doing that?
Well, I
Isn't
think,
that right? That's the basic question, isn't it?
yes. But you're exactly right. It goes back to what I was saying just a moment ago, Grant. We're working extremely hard in the corridors. The West State Street corridor, for example, the state has already committed, as they have with South Main, to redoing the road. And with that becomes some ability to make land use work a little bit better for you as well. But in doing that, we've got to recognize that we're not looking for just the highway to move a lot of traffic in. Rockford's still a city of neighborhoods, including the downtown area, and we're looking to make each of those neighborhoods as attractive as we possibly can. We're getting now in the downtown area, and you talk about the downtown moving out, that's really started to happen in Rockford. A lot of it through our assistance and through our nudging, but we're more than willing to continue to do that. We've had people just in the last couple of weeks talking about taking two older factory buildings and making them mixed-use developments that include loft-type apartments, using the river, which we've never, in my mind, adequately used as an asset to try to market the downtown area, using that as a way to try to gain some of this mixed-use and higher-end market-rate housing that, again, will have that impetus to push out. And we're doing all of that at the same time. I don't think by accident. We're doing that for the reason that it all has to happen together, or else you'll end up with a situation where it doesn't take off the way that it could.
Questions?
Thank you. My name is Don Hermanson. I'm chairman of the executive board of the Electricians Union Local 134 here in Chicago. Excellent presentation, excellent speech. I would like to make a brief statement parallel to one of the points that you brought up. We talk about the airports, or the airport, O'Hare Field. One of the things that shocks me as a labor leader and shocks a lot of the business people that I deal with, we don't hear the numbers really that are involved. The state of Illinois brings in the state of Illinois brings in $14 billion a year in conventions and tourism. I don't know where the break is, but the total is $14 billion. Of that, $12 billion come into Chicago. Okay, that's big money, has a big impact on our economy. O'Hare Field employs 50,000 people. There's 50,000 jobs out there. The peripheral jobs, there's 513,000 peripheral jobs, cab drivers, restaurant workers, et cetera, building tradesmen that are involved in keeping the place going. Big numbers, big economy. We have to, Chicago for so long has been the only game in town as far as conventions are concerned. We are now number 3 behind behind Las Vegas and Orlando, thank you. We did talk about that earlier, but we are number 3. If we build an airport down in Peatone and make it that much harder for businessmen to come into our environment, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Your airport, by the same token, is a finished product. It's Concord adoptable. You have the amenities that a big city has to offer as far as greeting people. And the one thing that I would really like to elaborate on is the high-speed rail link. Metro would be wonderful, but I think high-speed rail could bring a lot. And with one of the scenarios that we talked about before your speech, if they closed O'Hare tomorrow, moved everything out to Rockford, simplifying it for the sake of conversation, you could shut O'Hare down, take it down to the dirt. The experts claim there's enough room there to lay it out differently There's enough space there to make it work, but you'd have to shut the entire airport down to do it. Okay, if they, by the time O'Hare opened again, start bringing the domestic flights back to O'Hare and keep the air cargo, charter flights, what have you, the international flights, and have them come into Rockford. And the question of security is going to be a big item in the rest of our lives. We all know that. That could be taken care of on the train en route. There's a lot of things that could be done. Do you have any strong feelings on?
Well, not that I wouldn't like to have all of the traffic that's at O'Hare, but I've got to get out of the city today, and I don't think Mayor Daley would let me leave if that was my position. No, seriously, Don. We're looking at, and I mentioned it in passing, that the high-speed alternative. We've recently gotten back into that about sending people to those meetings. Chicago is one of the hubs for the high-speed network that they're talking about. Right now, they're talking about 2 lines, basically a Chicago to St. Louis and a Chicago to St. Paul line. The Chicago to St. Paul line, which might naturally have a Rockford influence, the route has been determined to go through Milwaukee and then Madison because of the population difference that's there, which is pretty hard to argue with. They've told us that as things progress, if this is successful as it has been on the East Coast, they would be looking for other spur routes to hook into that, at which point we could play a role. In terms of I really just don't believe that the O'Hare situation, however it gets resolved, I think it's going to be incremental. I think they're going to do
You're right.
changes to O'Hare incrementally. They're gonna close a runway down, move some things around. We may be a direct beneficiary of that in terms of cargo and some other things initially. In fact, I think we already have been, just because of the speculation about what would happen with O'Hare. But in terms of doing that, we want to be a player in the high-speed rail. We just know that at this point, given the dollars that are funded for rail by the federal government or even by the state, that's probably not in the cards in the near future. But we still think that we've got a good role to play in terms of demonstrating that we can handle the air traffic.
And keep in mind, I oversimplified it for the sake of conversation as far as moving everything out there in a limited time. Also, a thing that we overlook, we look at Milwaukee as more or less our sister city, and Rockford, just 90 miles to the west, second biggest city in the state of Illinois. We should have a link better than the expressway. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
The other point of that, Don, too, is that the growth, when you look at the growth patterns for the state, 2 of the fastest growing counties in the entire state and have been for the last several years are McHenry and Boone, which are the 2 counties right in between O'Hare and the Greater Rockford Airport.
Thank you very much.
At the City Club, you get good speeches and you get good questions. Just for those of you guys from Rockford. To close, the moderator has a question. Much shorter, but since my father-in-law was 134, I have to be. And besides, is that your dad? No. Just a little thought there. Good question, Don. A lot of people, some in this room, as I've noticed, are on this notion called smart growth. You're one of the few places in Illinois that's looking east and not looking west. Your growth corridor is McHenry and Boone.
Right.
By the way, I have been a small piston in the Rockford economic machine, being at the clock tower twice a year and at Maria's twice a year too to eat. So I'm not speaking as a rank amateur. It would seem to me, and not to get too controversial, far be it from me, right? Yeah. You would be really against smart growth in the sense of limiting the expansion northwestward from Chicagoland, because you're right in track. Because the point you just made is absolutely right. McHenry and Boone are the 2 fastest counties. They're leading right to you. You develop east, you become part of metropolitan Chicago without having to fudge the maps.
Well, and I think,
Isn't that right?
well,
I'm asking a question.
at the risk of sounding like my job description, yes and no.
You did
Yes,
learn a
we do
lot from
look-
America.
We do look to the east, and as I just said, that one of the visioning plans that the Chamber of Commerce has been taking the lead with is really looking at the entire corridor along I-90 from Elgin all the way to Madison, and there's some real opportunities that are within there. But I also, as having been on the smart growth task force when I was in the House, and then when we added the senators, it just became the growth task force, so. Don't tell them, we still need you needed to do in terms of infrastructure and other things to take care of the growth that we know is going to naturally occur. And so I don't look at it as an either or to say, well, you know, we subscribe to smart growth, therefore we don't want any kind of movement along I-90. I think that's going to naturally occur. The question becomes more from a growth task force perspective is not having the kind of undisciplined growth that we've had where the people end up out in front of the infrastructure, and then you end up with a whole passel of really serious problems. So I don't know that it's an either-or situation, but yes, obviously, we're looking to the east in many, many different ways and find many common interests with our neighbors to the east. So, but that doesn't limit us from saying that we think growth needs to be orderly. In fact, we're starting the early processes just in the last few weeks of trying to work in our county to get a comprehensive land use plan, because we stopped that planning process about 25 years ago, and it needs to come back.
Good answer. A one-year membership in the City Club of Chicago, and you could watch it on TV. A coffee mug that City Club of Chicago mayors have to drink coffee. If this is the staff that you have to work with,
I know.
it's a big cup. And I believe this is before we adjourn. I think this is true. You're still allowed to do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag in Rockford, aren't you?
Absolutely.
That certainly, this associates are from Madison, Wisconsin. We're adjourned.